In Bangladesh, 12th of February, the first election since mass uprisings in 2024 toppled a long-standing government under Sheikh Hasina. Tarique Rahman sworn in as Prime Minister just last week after his party, that's the Bangladesh Nationalist Party, secured a two-thirds majority in Parliament. In a pivotal vote with both its conduct and results widely seen as critical to political stability and economic recovery. The BNP, of course, no stranger to government in Bangladesh. It had two stints in power in the 1990s and in the early 2000s. It had been hounded out of political participation. Its return just a consequence of popular uprisings that toppled occasional partner but also bitter rival, the Awami League. Our senior correspondent Afifah Ariffin was at those elections earlier. Afifah, those who led that popular uprising, students, then went on to form their own party. But that party did not have sufficient success at the polls. I think 5 or 6 seats in parliament, and certainly very little say in policy formed in this new Bangladeshi parliament.
That's right, Wesu. I mean, what's striking about this election is that it comes a year and a half after that student protesters helped to drive out the previous government under Sheikh Hasina back in August 2024. So there was this very real expectation that this surge in this youth-driven momentum would translate into power at the ballot box. But as we saw, that didn't quite happen. So if we were to look at the results, the youth-led NCP, or the National Citizens Party, which emerged directly from that movement back in 2024, secured only 6 seats in parliament, despite fielding 30 candidates, despite joining a bigger coalition led by Jamaat-e-Islami. And several of the student leaders who were very prominent figures during those protests and then had contested as independent candidates also lost in their seats. And these are urban seats they contested in, even in central Dhaka. So what it appears to be is that many young voters had then backed more established parties like the BNP, which, as we know, went on to secure a strong majority. So what we're really seeing is that there is this gap between popular power and political power, and the youth movement has shown that it can reshape politics from the ground, but it has yet to break fully into the system itself.
Well, this break, it may not be full, but at 5 seats out of 30 that it contested, does that suggest change, at least the start of change in Bangladeshi politics?
I think that's really the question, because in many ways it doesn't look like a complete political reset, right? The established parties are still dominant. The structures of power seems to be largely intact. The BNP coming back into power, we have seen them rule Bangladesh for decades, before the previous government. But at the same time, it's very difficult to say that nothing has changed. In some ways, because this NCP was only formed post-protest in 2024, they've had a very short runway. At the same time, we're also seeing that the election is taking place under a very different political environment, one that is truly shaped by a younger, more vocal, more politically engaged population. So those protests in 2024, they really shifted expectations, particularly around accountability and representation. So it's not change in the final form, but it could be the beginning of a much larger transition.
All right, Afifah, the original protests in 2024 started over job quotas. It expanded into all sorts of grievances over a stagnant economy. Bangladesh's economy is very much dependent on ready-made garments. It's 85% of export revenue comes from the ready-made garment industry. Even before political unrest, financial organizations were urging Bangladesh to diversify its monocultural economy. And with the youth, so a very big part of the Bangladeshi demographic is 1 in 3 aged below 35. They're not going to be looking at a future in ready-made garments. Time as well for remake of the economy. Final question.
Well, that's right. I think the focus now shifts very quickly to the economy. So, as you said, Bangladesh's economy has long been driven by the garment sector. It's been a successful model, but there are all these increasing questions about how sustainable this is going forward. And this is where the youth factor becomes very critical, because you have a large young population, more politically aware, more vocal about its expectations. Many of them that we spoke to said this election wasn't about voting, it's about wanting a stake in the country's future. So the challenge for the new government is how we can evolve this economic model. Can they create new industries policies? Can they expand opportunities and bring young people into a process in a very meaningful way? Because if that doesn't happen, a lot of them tell me that the same energy that drove the protests in 2024 could resurface. That's a major theme in our episode in CNA Correspondent this week and something that we explored. So here's an excerpt of it.
This is my room. And this is where I live.
All your artwork.
Yeah, these are my artwork. And these were exhibited on the exhibitions.
Yeah.
Like this one was like 2 years back, and this one.
Art, she says, is her way of expressing herself.
And this one is my favorite.
What began as sketches in her room eventually moved on to the streets. After the July 2024 protests, she joined other young people painting graffiti murals across the city. Today, they serve as visual reminders of what had unfolded.
If you see the arts, you'll get to know what happened. The graffiti works actually represents about the July, about the fights, about the young, that whatever happens in the country wasn't in the right.
Now, with a new government in place, she is watching closely.
We just got the elections. I'm still getting a mixed challenges on the feelings that what would be the consequences, as it's a mix with the young generations, the Gen Z. I'm really hopeful that people will have more freedom to talk about the truth, about the country, about the people, about the situation that's going on right now.
For Ruma, change begins with the freedom for people to speak their minds. But for many young Bangladeshis, it must also mean the freedom to build a livelihood. For decades, Bangladesh's garment industry has powered its rise, driving exports, lifting families into middle class, and opening the workforce to millions of women and young people. It remains the country's largest formal employer.
Our working population, not just working population as a country, working population in the factories is actually quite young. We need to make sure that these people who are entering our factories at 20, 21, 22, that allows them to move into management in course of time. For that, we still have a lot of work to do. What we have excelled in the past was building more and more factories, getting bigger and bigger, growing at 20 to 25% per annum. A double-digit growth like that is going to be difficult in this world. The garment industry needs the country to be competitive. The new government has to do everything in its power to make our country competitive.
Growth at scale is one challenge, but for young Bangladeshis, the question is far more immediate. Where do they fit in this economy?
And senior correspondent Afifah Ariffin reporting live there from Kuala Lumpur.